have spent the last 2 days marathoning the After series, and I am desperate to talk about it. So strap in. We're going to talk about the entire series and why I think the movies are even worse than we remember them being, even though the last one only came out like last year. So let's just dive right into it. I have prepared a PowerPoint for us to go through. So there are 3 facts of this series going in that are just things that you have to accept as a viewer, and it's never going to change. It's never going to improve. This is just the way that it is. First is that Landon will always be the best, most mature character in every single scene. He will be the voice of reason, the most adorable character, and we will love him until the end. Oh, I forgot. I also got a pointer. And yes, it is a Keyblade from Kingdom Hearts. Number 2, every male character has an addiction issue that has ruined or will ruin the women in their life. And 3, any and every conflict between the main couple will be resolved through sex. They will not talk about it, and it will be brought up at least 3 times. Obviously, our 2 main characters and the love interest or the romance, the love story, whatever this whole series revolves around, is Tessa and Hardin, and I have chosen the most apt photos for them, I think, because especially Hardin, he's just crying the entire time. Tessa and Hardin meet each other when Hardin lets himself into her college dorm room where she is roommates with Steph. Steph is a sophomore, so is Hardin. They're good friends, and they have like a little friend group. She gets out of the shower, goes back to the dorm with no shoes, by the way, with no like shower shoes, which is just crazy. And he's in there reading The Great Gatsby. The book itself is very clearly a fake edition. As a reader, I know how to spot fake editions when they come up, and this is a fake edition. Anyways, they have a little banter back and forth. She asks him to look away while she gets dressed, and he says, "Don't worry, I'm not looking," in his fake, actually British accent. I know this has been said time and time again, but the man is actually British, but his accent is the fakest thing I've ever heard. So then Tessa and Steph go to a frat party where Hardin, Molly, Tristan, who is Steph's girlfriend, Zed, Jace, all are. They decide to have a little game of truth or dare, and it's revealed that Tessa is a virgin. Oh my god, a virgin at 17. Wow. And Molly ends up daring Tessa to kiss Hardin, where she ends up taking refuge in Hardin's room, and she is just so blown away by someone in college owning books, and they have an almost kiss. She does end up running out of the party, and then there is drama with her boyfriend Noah, who I thought was her brother in the very beginning of the movie. When she calls him, she's a little bit drunk, and he is like, "I'm
so disappointed in you. You start drinking as soon as you get to college."
The next day, in a shared English class, Tessa meets Landon. There's multiple recastings in this movie series. Like, every single person you see on the screen was probably recasted at some point. And so this is actually the guy that they have like later on in the series, but I just didn't have enough space to like put every single person that was recasted. Anyways, so she meets Landon. He's super adorable. Then Tessa and Hardin end up going at it about the love story in Pride and Prejudice. And during this conversation, it's very obvious that Hardin is trying to like playfully banter with her, make some jokes, stuff like that, and like pick at her. And she gets very riled up because Hardin, obviously never having read Pride and Prejudice, has some like really L takes. After class, Tessa finds out that Landon is actually Hardin's stepbrother. This is just too much. This is too unwieldy. We're not going to use that. They end up running into each other again at a coffee shop and banter about staying away from each other, in which Hardin suggests that they be friends. It takes her way far away to a lake, which you just met this man. It's a little unhinged to go meet him. He does have a nice Chevelle though. And they do some swimming and some kissing, and Hardin pets the poodle, if you will. In that same conversation, they literally talk about her boyfriend, Noah. He's like asking her about him, and she's like, yeah, he's fine, he's cool. And then immediately they get into doing stuff. Great decisions being made. They go to a local bar, and when Tessa starts asking him questions, he says,
I just don't think asking a bunch of arbitrary questions about someone's past is really going to tell you who they are.
which is actually exactly how you get to know people, Hardin. But during this conversation, you can actively see him trying to like change who he is and how he's responding to her based on how she responds and like trying to get on his good side. And then Molly and one of the dudes shows up at the bar, and Hardin tries to like rush her out of the bar as quickly as possible. And then when Molly won't let him up, he gives Tessa the keys and like basically tries to make her go wait in the car. She confronts him and is like, "Are you embarrassed that they saw me?" And he's like, "No," kind of gaslighting her a little bit. And then she says, "Well, I'll tell Noah about us." And he's like, "There is no us. We were just having fun. I don't date." And then, of course, we get a couple of sad montages until Tessa has a sex dream about Hardin. And the very next day, Noah shows up for a weekend with flowers, and they go to a bonfire party together where like all of the characters decide to play Suck and Blow. One of the One Direction knockoff punks, I didn't mention this is a One Direction fanfiction, by the way. One of the One Direction knockoff characters punks Tessa, and Hardin sees this, and of course he decides to pick a fight. And this like really resonates with Tessa. She's like really into it or whatever. And her and Noah, they're watching movies, leaving space for Jesus, of course, and she's just only thinking about Hardin and how hot he is and like he fought for her or whatever. So she gets a call from Landon in the middle of the night asking her to come get a handle on Hardin, a man who is at least a foot taller than her and 50 pounds heavier than her, going off on a drunken rage and breaking shit. When she gets there, Hardin reveals that he's drinking again, his dad is getting married to someone else, and his mom lives in a dump in London. She says, "Don't you think you've had enough alcohol?" He takes the glass full of alcohol and like throws it at her feet. She's in sandals, first of all, and second of all, she decides to get down on her knees and pick up the glass with her bare hands. So, of course, she cuts herself. There's a caretaking scene. They, like, do some heavy petting and stuff, and then they end up falling asleep. To her dorm room the next morning after Noah has been, like, calling and texting her and trying to figure out where she is. And he's like, "Okay, like, what the fuck? What happened? Where were you? I came to visit you. What are you doing?" And she doesn't really say anything. She kind of, like, stumbles through her words, and then Hardin shows up and kind of like Noah kind of like gets the vibe. So they start fighting. She's trying to like explain herself, and he storms off, gets in the car, and leaves. Tessa is obviously very emotional about the fact that she just lost like her best friend and someone that she's been with since she was like a child or whatever. And so Steph snuggles with her in bed, which I feel like there's a lot of relationships in this one that I feel like were a better match if Tessa wasn't such a piece of shit. And Steph is like actually the romance that we deserved. She still has that like bad girl, emo, rocker vibe, sexy, but she's not Hardin, I feel like we deserved that. But regardless, she ends up, after like a ton of montages, she ends up showing up at the roof of the frat house where Hardin is. He's being a sad boy. And this is a complete aside from the plot, but watching this movie, there is an insane amount of like breaks and pauses in between the dialogue to like delay the scene, and this was arguably the worst one. Like, I will insert a clip of the scene, not like slowed down, not anything, and you can see for yourself the amount of ridiculous pauses.
I didn't expect to see you.
When my dad left, I was 10.
But Hardin tells her that cheating isn't her fault, which is just like the most blatant lie and a horrible way to comfort someone for cheating. And then we get a montage of them being cute together, and there's a brief mention of Hardin writing in a diary. Keep that keep that locked up here. Wrestle over it, and then they start making out, and they're getting kind of hot and heavy back in her dorm. And Tessa's mom, who in this movie is this woman, but she gets recasted as this woman, storms in, and they get into an entire fight. And her mom basically gives her an ultimatum. She tells her mom, like, you have to let me live my life. And her mom's like, well, no, if I'm not able to make all of the decisions for you, then I'm cutting you off. So the very next scene, Hardin gets them an apartment. Now, one thing that this series does not do very well is like establishing a timeline. So it's pretty hard to tell what time we're in, how long they've been together, but it can't have been that long. And so they move in together. And in the movies, he claims that it is because he's just like apartment sitting for this person. And because she was cut off, like she needs a place to live or whatever. But in the books, he does it for her. Like he gets an apartment, they sign a lease together, like the whole shebang. It's kind of crazy. They decide to attend his dad's wedding. His dad... Life is not up here. She also gets recasted, but she says no. She has no lines of dialogue in the movie, but he does have a wife. During the reception, he obviously gives a speech, as you do, and this sends Hardin into like a complete tailspin. He calls him a drunk and dumps some good old sexual assault trauma into the conversation with Tess. And shockingly, this is actually one of the more touching scenes of Tessa showing up for Hardin. Usually their relationship suffers from her like pussy saving him trope, as you'll see as the movies go on. But this was actually a pretty nice scene of her just truly being there for him. He contains his own emotions, they dance together, and it's a very sweet moment. And then, of course, they fuck. And we finally see Molly talking to Tessa in the bathroom at the school. And through the lens of someone who has read the books and who has seen the movies up until like the third one previously, I watched this with a different context. I'm a little biased because Molly is my queen. She's just, love her, but until like the second one. But in this one, looking back at Molly's behavior as someone who has an on-again, off-again relationship with Hardin, and as someone who kind of has like that cool girl persona, like Amy Dunn style, well, obviously besides faking her own death. I find this moment to be kind of a genuine attempt on her part. She asks Tessa, how's the boyfriend or whatever, and Tessa's like, oh, we broke up, and she makes a comment about, oh yeah, I noticed that you were like hanging out with Hardin, that's what he does or whatever. And Tessa's like, well, what does that mean? And she kind of has like this emotional break in her character where she's like, Hardin does what he does. He does whatever he wants. And Tessa storms out, but looking back at the scene, I almost feel like it's Molly commiserating with Tessa a little bit, like talking to the woman that she feels like Hardin is cheating on her with, even though they're not in like an official relationship. This felt like that moment of Molly being like, yeah, it sucks that I like this guy who treats me this way, if that makes sense. So anyways, back at the apartment, Hardin's phone is blowing up, and Tessa reads a flirty text from Molly about them meeting up for the night. She confronts Hardin, and he acts completely defensive and storms out after asking, what's the problem if you trust me? Typical cheating behavior. And then we get more montages of him not coming home for days and her crying. And then Tessa finally gets a text from Jace to come to a nearby bar. And when she gets there, the whole gang is there. Molly, Steph, and Zed are sitting at the bar. And they're kind of feeling a little bit awkward about her being there. And then when Tessa reveals that they're living together, everyone is like very uncomfortable, very confused. And Hardin shows up, everybody else from the group shows up, and Molly reveals that their relationship is a sham based on a bet, and shows Tessa a video of Hardin saying,
You don't think I can make it happen? Make her fall in love with me. And then I'll just
turn it off.
Before she can fully see the video, Hardin's like trying to rush her away from everybody so he can explain, and everyone in the group clearly feels horrible about the whole situation, including Molly. And this is another situation where I kind of feel like Molly is like, don't you think this has gone far enough? Like, we all know that she even says that line. We all know that you are only having sex with her because of this bet. Don't you think like you've done enough? They end up fighting in the rain, in which he tries to use the like nothing would ever change my feelings about you line against her. Her saying that has everything to do with his past and not him faking their entire relationship and coercing her into a sexual relationship with no informed consent. But whatever, we're gonna gaslight out the gills, I guess. Tessa ends up making up with her mom and with Noah. Hardin starts drinking again and is just in general a sad boy. And Tessa gets accepted to an internship at a publishing place. All of this is kind of like brushed under the rug in this one. We don't really get a lot of backstory about the publishing, but it's kind of like mentioned at the wedding by Hardin's dad that he has connections at a publishing place and he'll get her like an internship interview or whatever. So she gets accepted to that. In English class, they're wrapping up for the year, doing their exams or whatever, and the professor gives Tessa an essay that Hardin wrote for the class, which feels a little illegal, and the whole essay is like about his feelings for Tessa and how he fell for her and all that stuff, and the movie ends with them sitting on a dock at the lake together. Throughout the narrative, Hardin is a lot of the times the like villain of the story, the one that is constantly messing over Tessa, and it's important to like ground yourself in the reality of Tessa's decisions. She is cheating on her boyfriend before she even knows who like Hardin really is. And so you can kind of say like her reactions later on have a lot to do with the behaviors that she sees or the things that are being done to her. But she is also not really innocent in this relationship. Like, obviously, because he's the loudest, the most aggressive, and he has a lot of childhood traumas and addiction issues and stuff like that, his problems sort of overpower hers, and because she's feminine and she's small and she's kind of meek, a lot of it seems like she's not really doing anything wrong, and he's kind of like toxic and just pushing her around. There's definitely some things about the way that Tessa behaves that are not good, like that are not, like, she's only 18, 19 at this point, so I understand the immaturity of it. She's not absolved of any bad behavior just because Hardin is out loud, like, worse than her. But anyways, we get into the second one, and we start the story with Hardin's narration, kind of catching us up to present day, and he compares them to the greatest romance novels of all time. Pride and Prejudice, Wuthering Heights, stuff like that. If you actually read a lot of Jane Austen, Emily Bronte's stories, yes, they center around romance, and some of them are romances, but some of them are like actually tragic and detail really fucked up relationships. Like, Wuthering Heights is not like a romance that you want to aspire to. To like compare that to like the greatest romances of all time just seems a little bit like wild. Like to assume that your relationship, for one, is going to be a tragedy in some cases, and for two is going to go down in history as like one of the greatest romances is just crazy to me. It's like, who do you think you are? The second movie starts 1 month after the last one, and it turns out that the dock scene is all a lie. They didn't actually meet up there. Tessa is heading out to her first day at her job, where she meets Trevor. He's down here in the little corner. He's so cute. They have a little meet cute in the elevator that is adorable and is very reminiscent of pretty much the beginning of every office romance that I've ever read. But she's an intern, she gets her own office, and she gets to read books all day, which is like a fucking dream. And she ends up falling asleep at her desk and meets her boss, which starts a series of long, inappropriate relationships with her bosses. But her bosses are these two, again, both of them pretty regularly recasted. But this is Vance and his wife, Kim. I think his first name's Christian. Vance is like their last name. They immediately take her on an overnight work conference trip on her second day with Trevor, of course, as an intern. And meanwhile, we get this absolutely delightful scene with Hardin.
Come on, release the pain.
I like the pain.
She goes shopping for an outfit at a nightclub that she's going to as an 18 or 19-year-old and gets this horrible dress and gets way too much detail about her two bosses' inappropriate relationship. And she also finds out that Hardin recommended her for the internship, which serves as new information, but I thought that this was like originally set up in the first one as his dad set it up. At the nightclub, Trevor tries to flirt with Tessa, and he continues to be absolutely adorable. And she briefly mentions that she doesn't have any money and she's been Ubering to work every day. They then get completely drunk with the client they're trying to woo, and Tessa makes out with a guy on the dance floor that she pictures as Hardin. She then drunk calls Hardin.
I'm drunk, uncomfortable, and I saw a tampon on the ground. I'm leaving.
Yeah, no, me too.
She goes back to her room with Trevor, and he says he doesn't read fiction, but we can move past that. We can move past it. She spills wine on him, and while she's cleaning his pants, his shirt and pants, Hardin breaks into her room.
Hey. Hey, Hardin, good to see you. How you been? Fucking Trevor! How'd I go?
And then he kicks Trevor out, they argue, and then they have sex. Even though Hardin literally said Trevor was a bad guy for trying to have sex with Tessa while she was drunk, even though he wasn't. This is a reoccurring thing across all of the movies, but they have the most unseasoned, dry-ass chicken sex that I have ever seen in my entire life, and I would rather scoop my eyeballs out than watch sex scenes between these two, but we get them every single time they argue. I would say at least 4 to 5 sex scenes in a movie. And it's bad. It's real boring. But anyways, the next morning they fight, of course, because Hardin is acting like a big ass baby, even though she's on a work trip. Hardin shows up to ask Landon for advice, and Landon tells him he's a fucking idiot, and Hardin is incapable of admitting that he has done anything wrong, so he runs off to London. Meanwhile, Trevor remembers her birthday and creates an entire cost analysis on the money she's wasting on an Uber, and researched and negotiated a used car for her, and then he got it to get on the company insurance. That's courting. That's fucking courting. That is intention setting. That is my man. That's my man. That's my man. We also find out that Tessa shared a birthday with Stalin, which does check out. She is also a menace. While Hardin is London, Tessa visits their old apartment to get her stuff. Joke's on her because he's actually back in London with his mom, who he hasn't told that they broke up. So they have to fake date and they end up having sex again. While visiting her mom, Tessa and her mom argue about her dad showing up. Her mom didn't tell her, and her mom continues to be the worst mother in history.
Why are you getting so worked up about this? I'm not getting worked up. I just don't understand why you'd keep that a secret.
And you never kept any secrets from me?
Tessa, of course, runs to Hardin, and they're back together with zero conversation about why they actually broke up. Hardin has a nightmare about his past with his mom. Hardin's mom talks about his past and says that he used to be really bad when he was a kid. They tried to get him into therapy. He started abusing alcohol, and then his nightmares magically went away whenever he started dating Tessa. And Hardin's mom's advice for their relationship issues is he sorry for lying? Stellar relationships in this series. Hardin then gives her perfect day for her birthday, like a perfect day coupon, and we get a montage of them doing stuff together in which he bitches the entire fucking time.
It says whatever assholes are made of.
His and mine are the same.
Bitch, where? She asks him what he wants for Christmas, and he says another chance. She says, promise to act like this every day, and he says no. Imagine you go to your partner and you're like, hey, the relationship is like, we're really not doing well. I feel like you're not treating me right. And your partner's like, okay, let's give me another chance, but I'm going to keep doing all the shit that put us in this position, all the shit that you don't like, all of the terrible things that I do to you and the way that I talk to you and the way that I borderline abuse you. Yeah, I'm going to keep doing that shit, but give me another chance. And then they fuck on her desk. Hardin's mom is still in wherever the fuck this is set. And they go to Hardin's dad's house for Christmas. And during this entire exchange, Hardin's mom seems relatively healed surrounding his dad and their past. But of course, Hardin has to punch his dad and throw a fit after getting drunk. Shockingly, the consequences of his action hit him, and he decides to break more shit and drink more. Then proceeds to ignore Tessa for several days. Meanwhile, at work, Trevor and Tessa keep having very cute little moments together, except when they have lunch and she dumps all of her relationship drama on him over a meal that he bought her. He tells her he's moving to Seattle and tells her, as someone who has a loved one that struggles with addiction, that their relationship isn't going to end well. Which, of course, spurns a montage of Hardin righting his wrongs the very next day. We're only in the second movie and I'm fucking exhausted. She gets a call from Vance offering her a position at the Seattle office with tuition paid, living expenses paid, and all of that for 2 people for a fucking intern. And then they attend a New Year's Eve frat party, and Tessa gets very drunk, and she fights Molly during a good old truth or dare game. They really need to stop with that shit. And of course, he sees messages about Seattle on her phone from Trevor, gets jealous, and then she gets jealous when she sees Hardin talking to a woman. And then, because they're so mature and work through their problems...
Hey.
Just hear me out.
Hey.
What the fuck? Hey! She kissed me. Fuck off, Tessa! What the fuck? How could you do that?
Why do you care, huh? You just kissed that girl.
They break up, of course, because they don't trust each other and they can't communicate. Next morning, when Hardin isn't answering his phone, Tessa goes searching for him. Her phone starts ringing, causing her to miss a light, and she gets into a car accident, and Hardin finds her being put in an ambulance and tries to chase it. When Hardin finally gets through to Tessa's phone, Trevor answers and tells him to fuck off. We have more sadness montages of him breaking shit and having nightmares. Finally, his mom's like, get the fuck out. Go back to the US. Go back to Tessa. I'm tired of your shit. In a very nice way. And then at Vance's going away party/engagement party, Trevor tries to confess his feelings to Tessa, and we get this delightful moment.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
There's actually more I'd like to say, but would you excuse me for a second?
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then, of course, Hardin shows up at the party and they reunite. And at the end of the movie, the same man from the beginning comes up to them on the street, and Tessa calls him Dad. The thing with the first couple of movies, or the second movie and the third movie, they're having the same arguments over and over again. They're rehashing the same shit. They're not communicating. They're just fucking every time they have a problem. They're breaking up and getting back together. And it's actually exhausting to watch. And I had the same issue with the books. Like, the books were even worse because each book was like 600 pages of the same drama over and over again, with splashed in with like more Molly scenes, more other women, other guys, like truly just the most exhausting shit to read. The movies do a little bit better job in the second and third one of like spicing it up here and there, some other plots I guess, and a lot of banging, but other than that it's like we're rehashing the same shit. But we start the next movie with a flashback to a fight between Tessa's parents and her mom kicking her dad out. Present, she offers to let her dad stay with them in their apartment, and Hardin is kind of acting like a dickhead, but he's being very protective. And Tessa's dad tells her he tried to have a relationship with her throughout the years, but her mom blocked any of his attempts. And Hardin tries to bribe him to leave, and he doesn't want the money. Tessa still hasn't told Hardin about Seattle when she's leaving in a week. She blames him for it, but asks him to come with her, and he wants to move back to London. He throws a fit about her going to Seattle, but they push the conversation off until later because nothing can be resolved in the same conversation. Hardin takes Tessa's dad to a bar and they get drunk together. Tessa has to leave class early because they get into a bar fight. So of course, Tessa has to spend the night taking care of both of them, and she also calls out Hardin for taking her alcoholic father to a bar, and the next morning her dad leaves. Swiftly moving on from that, not letting any characters process their emotions, Hardin and Tessa again get into an argument about Seattle, and Hardin actually makes the intelligent argument that he doesn't have anything in Seattle. He doesn't have a job, no family, no prospects, and tells Tessa that her being there isn't enough of a life for him to move. Thankfully, she makes it very clear that she won't be backing out and that she plans to move to Seattle, but I do find this argument on Hardin's end to be kind of mature. I get partners moving for their partners, but realistically, they've been together like maybe 3-4 months. And he's not enrolled in school there. He doesn't have any job offers. Your significant other that you have been with for 4 months is not enough reason for you to uproot your entire life, especially when you've never tried long distance. You are going into this with no plan in mind going in. What if you get there, you guys break up, you can't find a job? Like, you are secure where you are now. You have family, you have people looking out for you. And there's nothing to say that you can't have a long-distance relationship until you feel secure moving together. And it's not necessarily like about her not being enough, right, for him. It's like him getting there and having a life outside of her. He can't just like sit in the house and be waiting for her to come home and like make his entire life about her. And this is like the one time, especially early on, where I actually agree with Hardin in these situations. He didn't go about it the right way. They definitely didn't communicate the right way, but I don't think that his point is like immature or without reason. Tessa finds out from her boss that Hardin actually did turn down a job from Vance for anything he wanted. They get into another fight about this, and this time they're arguing about not communicating. Why are they together? We're 3 movies in, and they finally agreed to stop keeping secrets, and they're still fighting all the time about the same shit. Why? They're not ever happy together. We do get more montages, this time of a family vacation at a cabin with Hardin's family, which montages are just how we build relationships in this movie. I should have put that as like an undeniable fact. Any happy times, any relationship building, anything that's not arguing or fucking in this series is done through a montage. So they finally have a conversation about what they're gonna do when they move, and him possibly moving with her after Landon, of course, basically says like, there's nothing wrong with like you moving there. If you really loved her, you would put in the effort, whatever. So they finally have a conversation. But they can never be happy for long because they go to a restaurant together with the family, and Tessa gets jealous of a woman talking and hugging on Hardin, and so she starts flirting with the waiter, which then Hardin also gets jealous of her flirting with the waiter and acts like a complete dick. Which is like the biggest red flag if I've ever seen one. Of course, they fuck in the hot tub, and Hardin asks Tessa if she's moving to Seattle for Trevor. Answering the question, and he storms off. She can't find him. He's unreachable, so she goes to the bar and flirts with the waiter again and hangs out with him in retaliation. And of course, Hardin interrupts, and of course, we find out that the girl that Tessa was jealous of, where is she? I think I took her off. Lillian, she's gay. Because 2 straight people of opposite genders can't have a relationship. Tessa walks out with the waiter. He gives her his number and is like, hey, if you're in New York City, you want to hit me up, use it. And she keeps it and stuffs it in her bra, which of course, is just fodder for an argument later, which it surely is. It happens immediately. Hardin throws a hissy back to not trusting each other, of course, and he tells her that he got her the position with Vance. And he claims that the difference between the two of them is he can't live without her while she just loves him, because she won't give up on her job in Seattle. I hate that this is not part of this conversation, but I hate that anytime Tessa has to make a decision about their relationship, Every single person in Hardin's life, this time it's Hardin's dad, tries to convince Tessa to keep giving him a chance because she's so good for him, rather than consider talking to him about his behavior or what might be good for her. They have a blowout fight, he gets violent, he throws shit, he breaks shit, he punches someone, and then a parent, friend, someone comes and is like, you're just so good for him, he's just so much better after you, you know, like, it's such horseshit because there's no consideration for what the relationship is doing to her, and you're pushing her to, like, save him. You're pushing her to stay in the relationship, to be the bigger person and, like, save his life, rather than this being a relationship that benefits both of them. She has to, like, play mommy for him. And it's just so fucking frustrating. When he gets back to the apartment, she's already gone, and we get another sad boy montage of them living without each other. And he also finds a journal of hers detailing the toxic dynamic of their relationship. And he's reading the journal, struggling with not picking up a drink. Back in Seattle, Tessa calls Hardin, and of course, hears the voice of a woman in the background, so she hangs up. He calls back and reveals he's actually training at the gym, and then they continue to talk as if nothing has happened, which I have mixed feelings about. Part of it is, like, she's in a new place, and she's reaching out to have, like, a conversation with someone that she knows, and to feel a sense of comfort, and then also it's like falling into old habits and old routines without addressing the issues. But anyway, he eventually apologizes and they move pretty quickly on. And then we get another montage of them living and having, like, a long distance relationship without actually having a conversation about what that dynamic looks like. Hardin's nightmares have morphed into Tessa cheating on him. Relatable, but also not lost on me that she's replaced mommy in his subconscious. Because of the nightmare, he of course visits her on a whim without saying anything. He admits to reading her journal and apologizes for her behavior and says that it was important to get her side of the story and read her journal, not like an attempt to invade her privacy, but to get how she was feeling and how his behavior was affecting her. But he still starts punishing her for the dream that he had of her cheating, which is just unhinged. They have a conversation about it, and she's like, did I do something wrong? Like, she's so confused about why he's acting the way he is, and he's like, I'm so afraid of losing you, there's nothing I can do, everything's coming, all of these emotions that I've suppressed are just coming to the surface, and there's nothing I can do. Get fucking therapy, my guy. We get another montage of them just being like a normal couple who actually enjoy their time together, which is absolutely crazy, never seen that before. And then of course the montage ends with angst and fighting, this time about him not telling her that his mom is getting married to someone back in England. When Hardin gets back to whatever the fuck city they're from, Tessa's dad is stumbling drunk and throwing up on himself. He's beat up and owes someone money, which Hardin gives him via an expensive watch that his dad gave him. And he has a moment of clarity watching her dad ramble about doing better for her. Meanwhile, Tessa goes to the doctor and finds out that she may never get pregnant. Hardin finds out that he may not graduate in time, and he shows up in Seattle for a Vance event. Hardin tells Tessa that he plans to move to Seattle within the next couple of months, and at the urging of Vance, they go to England for Hardin's mom's wedding. There's a montage of wedding things, but really the most important thing that happens at the end of this movie is they catch Hardin's mom having sex with Vance the night before the wedding, and Hardin finds out Vance is actually his dad. We do get this delightful scene of Vance's wife normalizing cheating if you have history with someone.
What do I do? I love him.
Oh, and Hardin sets attached townhomes on fire while drunk.
We gotta get out of here. Get the fuck off me.
Vance, of course, takes the blame for it while Hardin and Tessa run off. And when Hardin finds out that he's getting away scot-free for arson and that his biological father is taking the fall, Hardin says, well, he's got lawyers. The empathy is outstanding. He goes back to his hometown in London and Tessa chases him there, but when she gets there, he's partying with other women who are half naked, hanging off of him, and for once, she actually confronts him rather than running off. We love the growth. But she gives him an ultimatum and he rejects her. He rushes her outside of the house and tells her to give up and fuck off. When Tessa gets back to her apartment, she finds her dad dead on the floor with a literal tourniquet on his arm. Once Hardin is actually reachable after a drinking binge, she refuses to talk to him, When she's in bed grieving, she's only thinking about Hardin. Not a single memory of her father, which is such poor writing. And Hardin shows up at her mom's house, but she still refuses to see him, tries to apologize again, and she completely ends things with him. And they say the penultimate problem with their relationship is,
I'm sorry I couldn't fix you.
after the funeral, Hardin says he wants to be there for her, and thankfully she doesn't respond and immediately leaves the conversation, and he later offers to move to Seattle, which Tessa denies. Back in Seattle, Tessa randomly decides to move to New York City with Landon, and this guy, not Vance, but the other one, have a really fantastic, touching conversation about their past and their relationship, where his dad really reaffirms for Hardin all the things that he really needed to hear about him still being his son and him still loving him. Back at the doctor's, it's confirmed for Tessa that she probably won't carry a baby to term. Hardin attempts to call her and she seems distraught, so he shows up to comfort her and stay the night. Shockingly, they don't actually have sex, even though she's sobbing, and that's usually what they would do. And the next morning Tessa tells Hardin she might never be able to have kids, and he makes it completely about himself and how his life might be ruined. I can't accurately express in words how awful this reaction is, so I'll just, yeah.
Can you say something?
I don't know what to say.
What do you mean you don't know what? You don't want kids anyway.
No, I didn't. Now it just feels like it's been taken away from us.
No, not from you, from me.
And then, of course, rather than having a conversation about the heinous behavior that he just exhibited, they devolve into arguing about him hooking up with women in London. Tessa tells Hardin that she's moving to New York and she wants him to be apart. And of course, he tries to fight Landon for her moving in with Landon. Logic is not there. And then he storms off. In New York, Tessa moves in with Landon for an unknown amount of time later because, again, we have no concept of time in this series. Hardin stays with Landon and Tessa for an unknown reason, for an unknown amount of time. Not only does Landon invite him to stay with them, he then asks Hardin to go to her place of employment and sit in her section for dinner. After her shift, Hardin is waiting for her and they walk home, and at the apartment, Hardin starts having nightmares, so of course Tessa confronts him and they sleep together, like actually sleep, not have sex. We get more montages of Hardin just walking her home from work and then hanging out, and he's in therapy. Oh my god. They have a moment where he refuses to sleep with her until she's ready for them to be back together. And then the very next scene they fuck, even though they haven't had a single conversation about their relationship. But they can only be happy for a second, rest assured, because Tessa finds the manuscript of a novel in Hardin's bag called After, and it's about their relationship. She obviously confronts him, and even though it's a book about their relationship, it's told from his point of view. And he makes it very clear to her that the story is autobiographical, but his purpose is to show that growth and unconditional love can happen after addiction and trauma. But she can only see it from her point of view and think about how it'll make her seen. I understand her argument in this, that it is written about their lives, and to a certain extent he should have told her about it. It's ultimately his story. It's his story to tell, and that's just kind of how writing works. Anybody can write about anything that they want. And I think it's a good idea for him to write about this experience and how he's changed, and I think it could be really helpful for people, and that was his intention the whole time. I do agree that he should have told her, like I said, but I think, yeah, I don't necessarily know that I agree with Tessa on this one, 100%. So we get another montage of them living life. Hardin gets a book deal. He finally moves on from AA, and he's just moving on in life in general. And it's incredibly obvious at this point that Tessa is still stuck and not trying to better herself in any regard, whereas Hardin is trying. He's trying to make a life for himself. At the end of the movie, she attends a book signing for Hardin in the city, and she runs off when he starts talking about his experience with where he was at when he wrote the book. And then we finally get into the last movie of the franchise. This one is completely told in Hardin's point of view, which is interesting because up until this point we really haven't gotten his point of view that much. The movie, when he reaches out to Tessa, it's been sometime later, we don't really know, but he reaches out and she tells him to move on. This causes him to start to drink again. He's living in London and he's become a complete recluse and he can't write. He has a meeting with his publisher who's pushing him to publish his next novel, but Hardin has a meeting with his parents where he continues his day drinking and acts like a complete dickhead. He finds out that Tessa moved to Portugal and decides to find her. This is like completely irrelevant. I don't even think she's in Portugal. I don't know where he got this information, but unless I missed something, he makes a grand tour to apologize to a bunch of women that he is absolutely traumatized. As a teenager, he had a history of making bets. For this specific woman, Natalie, he passed their sex tape around to all of his guy friends, which gets sent around, essentially ruining the future she planned for herself. But ultimately, the apology ends up with him talking about how much he's trying to improve his life. And we get flashbacks of him being the victim. And for some reason, while in Portugal, we start to get scenes of him hanging out with this woman, Natalie, and her friends. And this is where we get introduced to Hardin 2.0, Sebastian, a fake bad boy with very similar tattoos who tries to have a pissing contest with Hardin throughout the movie and starts writing the story of the women that he's victimized. Writer's block cured, I guess. I do appreciate that they don't seem to be trying to set up him and Natalie, that's Natalie by the way, I should have pointed her out, as a possible love interest, even if the entire point of her character is to cure his own trauma. In a beautiful place to make people want to watch, of course, because the movie really has no romance and doesn't really have Tessa in it at all. We only see her in flashbacks. Sebastian does confront Hardin at one point about what he did to Natalie, and shockingly, Hardin doesn't try to fight the guy, he just tries to get more drunk. Makes the pain of the entire event with Natalie about himself again, then tries to hook up with Natalie's friends, and then gets into a fight with Sebastian and his friend. Well, really, they jump his ass, and then he's just laying in the ground while they kick the shit out of him. But he does end up getting locked up, where Vance comes to bail him out. Vance tells him off, and it's the best fucking scene in the entire franchise.
Poor Hardin. The miserable drunk little victim sitting at home. Honestly, I mean, I'm surprised that you're not even embarrassed by yourself at this point. It's pathetic.
And he finally has a breakthrough with Vance's help, with 30 minutes left in the movie where nothing has actually happened. He decides to stay in Portugal, get sober, and start writing again. And after several montages, Natalie tries to kiss him, which I fucking hate. And then we get more montages of Hardin writing and hanging out with Natalie around Portugal. And then finally, he gives his manuscript to Natalie to read and approve before publishing. And he purchases her dream home. In the last 30 minutes, we head back to New York for Landon's wedding. We finally find out that the time skip has actually been 2 years between the time that they've seen each other, and they walk down the aisle together. Do I love that 10 minutes of the last 30 minutes of the movie about one central couple heavily features the wedding of side characters? No, but the wedding was beautiful. They do kind of make the best man speech about him, of course, and when they both storm off in the middle of it, they end up fucking, all very fitting with the fact that they don't actually talk to each other and make everything about them. Granted, they do actually talk it through. They have their big declarations of love, and again, the proposal at somebody else's wedding. I don't know how you can get any tackier. And then the movie ends with them years later with a child and a child on the way, and a truly diabolical wig for Tessa in their apartment in a snowy New York City. And that's the whole series. Each movie is like an hour and 45 minutes. I have wasted so much time on this series, and I think I can conclusively say, as an after connoisseur, if you will, this should have been maybe 2 movies. I think 2 movies is reasonable. Maybe 3 movies. I really feel like the last movie was pointless, for sure. I don't care about Hardin, and a lot of his character growth in this one to like make him a better person sucked. There's no character growth on Tessa's part. None of the shit that she pulled in the series is resolved in any way. She never apologizes to anybody. She does no healing or growth herself. And so the conclusion altogether is a little disappointing. The fact that the ending scene of where they are in their happily ever after was like a minute long is equally frustrating, but movies are fun to watch and like pick at. But skip, for the love of God, skip the sex scenes. Just for yourself, for your own sanity. The fact that this was peddled as like a college 50 Shades or like a college 365 Days is a travesty. I didn't think that 365 Days or 50 Shades are like sexy movies. I personally find watching people have sex and kiss and stuff to be very uncomfortable. Yeah, this was not even on the same league as far as like sexiness to the general masses, you know? So, and I do find it interesting that the first one was like PG-13 and then the rest were rated R so that they could like squeeze in as many sex scenes as they could. There's not enough conversation about how truly heinous the shit that they do to each other is on like the most basic, like toxic level. They're not like kidnapping each other and like stabbing each other and doing crazy shit like that, like in some other movies with toxic relationships. This is toxic in a way that I feel like a lot of people experience. Regardless, that's the After series. I would love to talk down below your thoughts on this series. If you've watched it, I sure hope you have, if you've gotten to the end, or if you don't care about spoilers and such. But I would love to continue doing videos like this. But I really hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this from me. Check out my backlist. I have some other things like this that you might enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in my next one.